Good
Okay.
afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ryan Jackson. I serve as the Deputy Political Director with Senator Warner's reelection campaign. I will also serve as the moderator for this discussion with Senator Warner and Congressman Bobby Scott. This town hall is streaming live to both Senator Warner's campaign page and also Congressman Scott's campaign page. So if you do have a question, feel free to outline your question in the comments section. You can also send us an email with your question at info@markwarnerva.com. Before we get started, though, I know many of you may be wondering how you can get involved with our campaign. So I'll pass it over to Aleem right now. He'll let you know how you can get involved.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Aleem Flowers. I'm the Regional Director on the Coordinated Campaign for parts of CD 2, 3, and 4. I want to start off to say that we're all here for a reason. There was something going on in this country that brought every single one of you here today. And we know that this country is being destroyed by a virus, but there's also been another virus that's been with us for hundreds of years, and it's called racism. Y'all are here because you see the injustices that are taking place in this country and you're sick of it. You're here because you want to see structural changes in criminal justice, housing, healthcare, and education. Most importantly, you're here because you know that Black Lives Matter. And you also know that we have a great group of folks like Vice President Joe Biden, Senator Mark Warner, and all of our congressional people running up and down the ballot, like Congressman Scott, have the plan and the vision to fix these changes. So how about you can get involved? Now is the time to get involved, right now. We don't want to wait until GOTV. We don't want to wait until almost election day. We need to be making calls now. Because of the coronavirus, we're doing everything virtual for safety, so you can make these phone calls in the pleasure of your own home. And if you haven't phone banked before, no worries. We'll train you up and get you ready to go. You can sign up for these phone banks on markwarnerva.com. And you can also sign up at mobilize.us/va victory.com. So again, my name is Aleem. I'm the regional, and I hope to see you soon. And let's fight and let's win. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aleem. I'll now pass it over for opening remarks to the senior senator from Virginia, Senator Mark Warner.
Well, thank you, Ryan. Thank you for all you've been doing for me. And Ryan actually worked for Congressman Scott, who is I'm the senior senator, but he is the senior dean of the congressional delegation in Virginia. It's done a remarkable job for many decades. Aleem, thank you for being on the coordinated campaign. We really, we all know we're tired of kind of doing all these remote activities, but as you mentioned, we have a pandemic, but we also have a chance to make significant change on the systemic racism that has afflicted our country literally for hundreds of years. We want to hear from you today. Just very briefly, we in the Senate are trying to take up the good work that Bobby Scott did and others in the House to make sure that we realize that millions, tens of millions of Americans are still dealing with huge hardships from the pandemic, and the Senate has not acted. Literally as of today, people who have received a extra bump up on unemployment, $600 a week, that number actually came from the Trump administration's, a story that's not often told, but that money has kept many Americans out of poverty. That expires because of the Senate's unwillingness to act, and whether it is making sure we maintain people's unemployment benefits, whether it's making sure that we maintain commitment for small business, whether it's a piece of legislation that I'm working on and trying to dramatically increase access to capital for Black-owned businesses and Brown-owned businesses and other minority businesses. There's a lot in front of us, but none of that's going to come to pass if not only if the Senate doesn't do its job, but if we don't, frankly, turn out this president in I believe the 96 days that we have remaining. So I look forward to your questions, your comments, and I can't tell you what an honor it is for me to work with the senior dean of the Virginia delegation, somebody that was making positive change while I was still in college, but is still, leading the whole congressional delegation, and that's my good friend Bobby Scott.
Thank you, Mark. I think I lost count of the number of references you made to the fact that I'm older than you are, but that's okay. You're doing a good job, and we can just be as proud as we can of your work on the Intelligence Committee with all the foolishness and buffoonery going on in Congress. There's one committee that looks like it's doing a good job, intelligent, deliberate, doing the business of the work, and that's the Intelligence Committee in the Senate, and that's to a large degree because of your good work. So I want to thank you for making Virginia proud. It's just so important. I think you've indicated, you've heard that the Senate could be doing a lot better if we had a few more Democrats over there in responding to the work of the House. We saw the difference a few votes could make by tilting the majority in the General Assembly, when in terms of minimum wage, instead of gun safety and a number of other issues, bills we couldn't get out of subcommittee last year were sailing through and being signed by the Democratic governor. We're passing a lot of good bills in the House, but the Republican majority, you're doing the best you can, but you're dealing with a Republican majority that doesn't show any indication that it cares. My work is as chair of the Education and Labor Committee, all of early childhood, K through 12, higher education. We're passing a lot of good bills in labor, not just the minimum wage, but also trying to get OSHA to do something on dealing with the COVID-19, making sure the NLRB makes it realizes that people have a right to join a union. It should be a right, not a fight. We're doing juvenile justice, Older Americans Act, but most of our work has been in response to COVID-19. You mentioned the $600 extra in unemployment compensation. That's been a major part of the reason why the stock market collapsed at first and then came back, where they noticed that people still had money to spend. The eviction, suspending evictions, making sure people had tests, that student loans, there was relief on student loans. We also passed, after we did all that good work, we realized we still have more to do. And the House passed the HEROES Act, continuing the good work that we've done on the unemployment compensation, contact tracers, education, the OSHA standard requiring OSHA to do something about infectious diseases, heroes pay. There's a lot of good stuff in that legislation. And the Senate, to the best we can determine, hadn't even bothered to respond. One of the major, they've come up with a response, but it's not clear they have the votes to even support their own response. One of the major parts of the HEROES Act is support for local and state government. If we don't backfill the revenue shortfalls for state and local government, anything else we do in that bill will only partially offset the cuts that are coming. And we saw that in Virginia. Our General Assembly session ended right before the pandemic was kicking off. The veto session, where we consider the governor's vetoes and amendments to bills, came about 6 weeks later after the revenues had been reforecast, and we learned a new word: unallocated. That's what happened to the teacher raises, unallocated. Counselors in the schools, unallocated. Money for community colleges, unallocated. Norfolk State had construction money, $135 million, unallocated. If we can pass the support for local and state governments, all that money, we can learn another word: reallocated. And they can get all that money back. And then the money we have in there for education, to reopen the schools, can be properly spent and make a difference. But if we don't have money for state and local, it's just a waste of time, because they're going to be cutting so much that that anything we appropriate won't even cover the cuts. We have a lot. We've done a lot. The policing bill that the House passed is a great piece of legislation. The Senate refuses to bring up anything close to the good work that we've done, because the—
And I should add, Bobby, I'd just like to add that that bill, Justice and Policing Act, which is what you passed in the House, I'm proud to be one of the original co-sponsors on that with Corey and Kama and others. It is a very good bill.
And there's nothing radical in it. It's just a good policy all the way through. Together, it will make a profound difference. And because we need about 3 or 4 more good Democratic senators, we can't even bring it up. But that's why it is so important. Voting rights, everything depends on this election. We need to re-elect Mark Warner first, then help elect some of his friends running all over the country, and then elect Joe Biden as president of the United States. So when Congress does its good work, we have a president, they'll sign the bills. So Mark, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you, and we look forward to the questions.
And thank you, Bobby. I do want to make sure, I do want to get rehired, and I'm hopeful that Joe Biden will be rehired. But the literally years and years and decades of experience that Bobby Scott has, he needs to be rehired as well. And I know that's going to come to pass.
Thank you. Thank you. Ryan?
Thank you. Thank you. Again, if you do have any questions, please list those questions in the comment section of either stream, and we'll get to as many as we can during this conversation. I'll start off with our first question. It is regarding voting in this upcoming election. Barbara from Facebook wants to know, is there a difference between absentee voting and mail-in voting? And if so, what is the difference?
Let me start with that. This is a made-up difference by Donald Trump to confuse and frighten people. Donald Trump has voted by absentee at least the last couple of elections, depending on which state, which year he chooses for his home state. I know he's recently chosen Florida, I believe, to try to avoid his responsibilities in New York. I'm not sure, but was my understanding. And whether you vote by mail or absentee, and in Virginia, we've made 3 major changes in the law. You can now vote in Virginia by mail without any excuse, any reason, if you simply choose to vote by mail. Used to be called absentee, now it's called vote by mail. Secondly, starting September 19th, every jurisdiction will have to allow 5 days a week and at least 2 Saturdays the ability to vote in person. So if you don't want to wait in the line, and one of the things that Bobby and I are working on is trying to make sure in the larger jurisdictions, there's just not one place to vote, but you could go vote a number of places. And then should you choose to vote on election day, you can actually do a curbside drop-off. So if you feel concerned about going to a public location, if you're immune compromised, if you're an elderly person, you still have that right to vote, and you can do it with a curbside voting. Those are all, what Congressman Scott said, these are all changes our legislature made, but this distinction that Mr. Trump keeps making between absentee and vote by mail is nothing but, at least in my mind, political rhetoric.
Again, that's the difference that the majority in the General Assembly made. We couldn't get these. They were doing voter suppression year after year after year. The minute we had the majority in the House and the Senate, they were making it easier to vote. That's what's so important to elect Democrats top to bottom, and particularly important to elect Mark Warner, re-elect Mark Warner to the Senate.
Thank you. We do have another question. This one is from Kim from Franklin. She wants to know, what are you doing to make sure that foreign powers can't interfere in our upcoming elections?
Well, again, I'll let Bobby take the next one to start with, but let me start with this one because this is one that I've spent the last 3.5 years on in my role in the Intelligence Committee. There are 3 or 4 things we can do. One, we need to continue to keep pressure on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube to make sure that they ferret out, foreign actors who are pretending to be Americans. What we saw in what Facebook, the Russians did in 2016 was many Russians tried to misrepresent themselves as Black Americans to try to turn down Black vote. Each of these companies have gotten better, but there's still a ways to go. If you follow this, you may have recalled, like literally 2 weeks ago, somebody broke into Twitter, took President Obama's name, took Joe Biden's name, took a series of other people's names, and basically took over their accounts and made fake statements. Think about if that happened a few days before the election and somebody that said they were Barack Obama was telling you not to vote. Huge, huge challenges there that we have to keep the pressure on the social media companies. Secondly, we need to make sure, and there are good people in our intelligence community at the National Security Administration, NSA, at ODNI, the Director of National Intelligence, at CIA, at FBI, trying to do their job to keep the foreign influences out. And we have gotten a bit better. But the bad guys have gotten better as well. Last Friday, was the first time the Trump administration acknowledged that Russia, China, and Iran are all trying to interfere in our elections. And part of my responsibility is to make sure, and nobody wants to reveal classified information, nobody wants to expose sources and methods, but it is absolutely incumbent upon this administration to warn the American people if they suddenly see a bunch of stories that might appear about Joe Biden or about Bobby Scott or Mark Warner that seem kind of crazy, and it comes from some strange source. This administration needs to acknowledge that these countries, Russia in particular, practices disinformation. And this is an ongoing challenge we have, and there is more work to be done. Bill Evanina, who is a decent guy, came out with the first round of some revelations last Friday. We need to keep pressing the administration to continue to educate Americans. At the end of the day, Americans need to decide who the next president is, who's going to control Congress. It should not be influenced by Russia or other nations.
Let me just say that members of the House had a classified briefing on this issue just yesterday. And so, as Mark has indicated, we're a little restrained on what we can say, and Mark is a little better at more experienced at drawing that line than I am. And so I'm not going to get anywhere close to the line. But I would just advise you to be careful, as Mark has suggested, be careful about anything you see on the internet or on social media. It may not be true. It may be planted by foreign governments, and not to get all discombobulated about what something pops up on social media. I don't have confidence in this administration. They were inviting Russia to get involved in the election 4 years ago. But I think it's just behooves the American people just to be cautious as to what you see on the internet. We know what we need to do in November. We need to get out and vote for Joe Biden, Mark Warner, and members of Democrats running for the House. We need to do what we know how to do.
And Ryan, can I just add one thing? Although I find it, Bobby, you are running too, so you have to acknowledge that they need to get out and vote for Bobby Scott as well. But one of the things that we have to do, if you're on this Facebook Live because you're a Democrat and you believe in our cause, we have to educate our Virginia voters. Traditionally, 90% plus of our voters have voted on election day. And one of my greatest fears is if we have an upsurge in COVID. One of my greatest fears is if we have certain states, God willing, it wouldn't happen in Virginia, where people say, oh my gosh, we don't want anyone that has been exposed to even somebody with COVID coming to a polling station. We need to do all we can to convince our voters to use vote by mail, to use the, I believe, 45 days plus we're going to have on in-person voting before election. We need to work with our registrars to make sure that you just don't have to go to City Hall. We should make it at libraries. We should make it at user easy places to vote, to make sure we vote early. And one other item, and I make this as an appeal. Again, you know, Bobby has been doing politics a long time in Virginia, and one of the things that he has taught me, and I think all of us, is that voter registration, you know, during the summer is so important. And our voter registration numbers in Virginia are down literally 40%, not because people aren't interested, but because young people, you know, as they graduated from high school, didn't get a chance to register easily to vote. As DMVs reopen, you know, if you have to get your license renewed, if you have become a new American, you know, there are easy ways to go online, elections.virginia.com, and or just, you know, Google how to register to vote. We need to make sure that we get new Americans and young Virginians to register to vote. And that is something that if you're frustrated by Donald Trump and you're saying, what can I do today, July 31st, August 1st? If you can help contact people about voter registration, nothing is more important.
Thank you so much. Well, I'll next go to a question that may be more catered to Congressman Scott in his role as chairman. Jennifer from Facebook asks, what can we do to make sure teachers are protected when school resumes?
Well, the first question is whether or not schools are going to open or whether you will continue distance learning. Most school systems that have made a decision have decided to, at least for the first few weeks, do distance learning. The fact is that most schools are not prepared, have not spent the money that it takes, and just not ready to open for in-person education. There are a lot of things that have to be done. One is you have to decide about testing. You can't have a high school where 2,000 people come from all over the community into one place and then go back and forth every day and not expect somebody in there to be infected. What are you going to do? And how are you going to discover it? If you wait until someone is test positive, it's too late. I mean, if they show symptoms, you have to test them so they test positive. If they wait till symptoms, it's too late. They had a meatpacking plant where 3 people showed symptoms, so they tested everybody. Hundreds of people tested positive. And so you can't wait until people show symptoms in a high school before you think you have a problem. There are things like ventilation. The report just last couple of weeks showed that 40% of the school districts need to replace or major repairs to their HVAC systems, heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems. Half of them. The CDC says if you don't have proper ventilation, you're going to have a problem. That's why you're going to have restaurants serving food outside but not inside, because if it's inside without proper ventilation, people start breathing, it gets in the air, it doesn't go anywhere, and everybody's got a problem. Is your school properly ventilated? How are you going to get the students to school? If you're going to say, well, you can only have 1 child per seat rather than 2 children per seat, that means half the children in the bus. Let's do a little arithmetic. If you got half the children in each bus, you're going to need what? Twice as many buses. Do you have twice as many buses? How are you going to do the seating arrangements? Have you got the furniture set out? How are you going to sanitize? We had a hearing a couple of days ago on opening schools. person from Tennessee said that bought disinfectant for every classroom. Well, the classroom isn't going to disinfect itself. Did you hire custodians? Or we're going to just tell the teachers to spend 20 minutes an hour disinfecting instead of doing lesson plans. I mean, we know we make them buy supplies, and we make them buy PPEs, their personal protective equipment. You know, what is the planning that's gone into it? And if you've got raging pandemic in the community, you can't expect thousands of people, a couple of thousand people to come into to the same building and not expect massive problems. And so in terms of protecting the teachers, the first way you protect the teachers is to make sure you make the right decision on whether to open or not. Most of the schools that have decided in Virginia have decided, at least for several weeks, to continue as they were at the end, going virtual. Once they start opening, you have to have the personal protective equipment. You've got to have now OSHA hadn't done its work to protect the workers. If you protect the workers, you necessarily have to protect the students. But Virginia is the only state in the union with a standard for protecting workers from airborne infectious diseases. The only state in the union. California has it for a couple of industries. Nobody else does. We have been badgering OSHA for weeks to try to get them to have a standard. They won't do it. After all the problems in the meatpacking plants, nothing. After all the problems in the nursing homes, nothing. All the healthcare workers, nothing. They give a little guidance, unenforceable guidance. Well, that's not enough. What is OSHA doing in the classrooms? We have to follow not the political advice, but the advice of the experts. And most of the experts are saying that we're nowhere close to ready to opening the schools. And I think that's the best way you can protect the teachers, and that is not opening the schools prematurely.
And Ryan, let me just add to what the chairman said. Two things. One, the current Republican plan, and again, remember, we spent 2.5 weeks waiting for a Republican plan. There was no plan. They had 8 separate plans they couldn't agree on. You know, they have about $70 billion. What the congressman, the chairman has proposed, what I proposed is more like $170 billion for K-12. Because if you have to take, as Bobby said, double the buses, or if you have to, you know, have this much PPE. So there's the money issue, but the other issue, and this is the one that I find particularly offensive, and particularly coming from folks who have always traditionally believed in states' rights and local rights. The decision about whether the schools in Alexandria, where I live, should be open should be made by Alexandria parents, teachers, superintendent. This decision about whether Newport News schools are open should be decided by the community in Newport News. If the schools in Wise County and far Southwest should be decided by folks in Southwest. When we have Donald Trump and Betsy DeVos, who, by the way, has been trying to take money that Congress put for public schools and move it to private schools, when we have them trying to scare school divisions and say they will not receive federal dollars unless they open based upon Donald Trump's political plan, that is wrong. It is healthcare wrong. I think it is inappropriate. I have legislation in the Senate that makes explicitly clear that no president and no secretary of education can tell a school division what is in the best interest of the healthcare of their children. That should be decided on a local basis based upon, I think, the very, important criteria that Congressman Scott laid out.
And I think Mark is absolutely right. Of the 70 billion, they take 10 billion and give it to private schools, cut the rest in half, unless you open. And their plan is either open your schools or we're going to cut your funding. They cut the last 60 billion in half. You're not open, you're not eligible for half the money. So most of the schools will only be looking at a little pot of money for $30 billion. But remember what I said about state and local funding. State and local are going to cut way more than $30 billion out of school budgets. And so this little 30 billion, 60 billion, even 70 billion won't come close to the cuts they'll be inflicted on state and local. The proposal has the money. We have the state and local, so they're not cutting. Then we have funding of 100 billion for education, most of it for K through 12. And we have money in the moving forward infrastructure bill. We were able to get school construction money in the infrastructure bill. Nobody's ever seen that before, which could be used to fix the ventilation systems. And you have to plan. You can't do that. Say, okay, oh, we finally decided to give you some money the 3 days before school opens, and think you can fix all your ventilation systems in 3 days. This takes planning. It takes resources, and open or I'll cut your funding is not a plan.
Yes. So that's a good segue to our next question. It's Chris from Richmond. He asked, can the senator or congressman provide an update on the next recovery package and the impact on Virginia, particularly where things stand on unemployment benefits, aid to state and local governments, and money for schools and universities that will potentially be reopening soon?
Well, let me start and again, compliment Chairman Scott. And you got to serve for a long time to be a chairman. So the fact that Bobby is, I remember going to actually a celebration for Bobby over a decade ago, celebrating, I can't remember whether it was 60 years of service or 30 and 30, but it was
60 years old.
A remarkable achievement. But, the House did their job. They, it wasn't perfect. There was not everything I agree in there, but they did their job. The Senate, we've spent 2.5 weeks, Mitch McConnell spent 2.5 weeks trying to get his Republican colleagues to agree on one bill. He couldn't get them to agree, on a bill, so they have 8 separate bills. I strongly support state and local aid, which is terribly important. We've lost 5 million jobs in state workers and local workers already. I support the over close to $170 billion, even where the House was before. We need to up the numbers in terms of local aid to K-12. We need a lot for higher education. I was with the presidents of Norfolk State and Virginia State the other day. If they don't have the kind of legacy funds that UVA has, they're under greater duress and their students are more at risk. So I think, and on unemployment, the $600 a week, remember, for people who are viewing this, the $600 a week bump up was not some Democratic plan. The $600 a week bump up came from Donald Trump's Department of Labor because they didn't feel they had the technology to adequately figure out how to make people whole. Now, at some point, winding down some of that program is an appropriate discussion. But when the virus is raging, to take that money at a cliff as of today out of people's pocket that will send people into poverty is economically wrong. If anyone looks at the newspaper today, we've had the largest economic decline in American history, a 36%, I believe, contraction in the economy in this last quarter. If this Republican proposal to cut off the millions of Americans who are spending this money, they're not hoarding it, they're spending it to pay their bills, comes arbitrarily today without any relief, you're going to see that decline potentially turn into depression type numbers. And that's morally wrong, it's economically wrong. And I just say I'm going to work with Chairman Scott and others I do think, you know, the thing that's wild is kind of being in the middle of with some of my Republican colleagues. A lot of them did it. You know, they suddenly have seen their states with COVID ramping up, and they are seeing their community shut down. You know, they need to move past their political talking points and come to the table. Let's negotiate something. Let's finish this. Congress should not take a recess until we get this deal done, because we're not talking about a stimulus bill. We're talking about helping Americans out of an immediate hardship.
And that's exactly right. This extra $600 for a median worker will just about make them whole in cash. The problem is that most people do not count as cash income the fact that they get health insurance. So if you've lost your job, you got to pay your health insurance some kind of way.
Right.
$600, and they don't care about health care. You know that. So the fact somebody can't purchase health care insurance doesn't faze them. But that's the money that can relieve a lot of pressure. Along with the eviction, you've got millions of people ready to be evicted overnight if we don't do something. And this is just going into an economy where we have the worst unemployment that we've had since the Great Depression. Even in the 08-09 recession, we didn't have unemployment rates like this. We've never had people filing for unemployment like we've had in the last few weeks. The previous record for filing unemployment in 1 week was 600 and some thousand. We've had about 12 consecutive weeks where the number has been over 1 million. It's gotten 3 millions. And that's why the employment commissions can't deal with it. They've never seen numbers like this. Back to back to back to back. There were several million back to back. 600,000 was the previous record. With all those people, about 30 million now drawing unemployment, you're going to all of a sudden cut off $600. You will have a profound effect on the economy. People, as Mark said, who are drawing unemployment spend every dime of that money. You send out random $1,200 checks. A lot of people, some people may spend it. Most people will just stick in the bank, pay off a few credit cards. You know, if you're lucky, you might buy some mutual funds. But it's not going to get spent like if you give that money to people drawing unemployment. And that's where it goes right in the economy. And that's why the stock market has come back almost to where it was before the pandemic started, because people are spending the money, even though the economy, the spending crashed. With the $600, a lot of spending is still going. So we need that money. The economists tell us the economy will crash without it. And so you help the individuals, you help the economy. You know, how do you not do it? So that the House has passed the bill. It has another round of $1,200 checks. The $600 continues to support the relief on student loans. It provides, as I said, the OSHA mandate to do something about OSHA. It helps you if you lose your job, you lose your insurance. It helps you with your insurance. It helps expand Medicaid. I mean, there are a lot of good things in that bill. Treatment, if you get infected and run up medical bills, no copays and deductible on your treatment. There are a lot of good things in that bill. Now, if the Republicans want to negotiate, first of all, they got to do state and local. You can't fail to do state and local support because everything else is we just wasted breath after that. But what is in the bill that they don't feel is important? They don't have a response that they can get all of their members. They've got too many members that don't want to do anything, and too many members that want to do a lot more. That what they have proposed does not have 51 votes in the Senate on their proposal. So they have to get their act together. And I believe that the votes in the Senate will involve maybe half of the Republicans and all the Democrats, and you can get a consensus. But you're not going to have a bill that at least a lot of Democrats. You have to have a bill that appeals to Democrats because they can't pass it on their side. And if it's going to include Democrats, you're going to have state and local, and you have to have support for people in need.
And Ryan, can I just add two things to what Chairman Scott said? One is, if there was an area I'd be willing to negotiate, it'd be on the $1,200. I think giving every American $1,200, whether they've done okay or not, I think the PPP program was a good program, but unfortunately, I know people who own businesses who haven't been hurt at all, but still got the money. I think we need to target the money to people who have been hit the hardest. That is disproportionately Black Americans, it's brown Americans, it's rural Americans. And I would, if the Republicans want to save some money, let's not give it to some of the, to the folks who are doing fine. And one of the things that the congressman said that I think is really important, and I'd urge anyone, especially folks who don't agree with Bobby and I, don't believe us. Look at any economist, as conservative economists as there are around, who say with this enormous historic drop in economic growth, if we tighten up now, if we are not willing to make greater investment now, especially in people who are in need, we're going to pay for years. If there was one thing we should have all learned out of the 2008 crisis, I think, unfairness at times. And listen, I didn't get this totally right. Let me acknowledge, I think I was probably not as forward-leaning as I should have been. But the fact that we put so many people kicked out of their homes because of foreclosure kept the recession going years longer. So I do think, as the congressman said, I read today, I think the governor is trying to extend the eviction moratorium to at least September 7th. I think we ought to go further than that. But this is not the time to cut back on support for people in need. For every dollar that we so-called save now, we will simply cost us longer in the long term.
Yeah, thank you. I do want to get into as many questions as we can. So I'll combine some questions with Julie from Facebook and also Joy from Hampton. They state, what are you planning to do, or what have you already done to stop the manipulation of the Postal Service by the Trump administration? They're very concerned as we go into the upcoming election.
One of
the things we did was put money in the in the CARES legislation for post offices, and even more in the HEROES Act, so that they would have money to go forward. We're very disappointed. The problem is that the president doesn't like the Postal Service because it's government run. He wants somebody to go in and make a profit, privatize it, so somebody can be making a profit off of it. When you make a profit, you will focus on the easy routes where you're going from big city to big city, an apartment complex to apartment complex. Those in rural areas where you have a little space between the houses and it takes longer to deliver the mail. They won't get the kind of service. They want to cut out Saturday service. If you're supportive of the Postal Service, you need to make sure you vote on November 3rd. One of the concerns is that if we let it kind of atrophy a little bit and if we let it fall down, it won't be ready for the mail-in ballots. Different states have different provisions, whether the ballot has to arrive by election day. Some give you a couple of days as long as it's postmarked by election. In Virginia, it's got to arrive by election day. So if the Postal Service is a little bit lackadaisical, your ballot can be mailed in plenty of time, and just kind of by the time they get to delivering it, it's too late and it doesn't count. What we did was put a lot of money in the CARES Act and even more in the HEROES Act to make sure that the Postal Service is alive and well.
And let me just add two quick things. Remember, there are very few things government entities that are actually mentioned in the Constitution. The Postal Service is. It's a constitutional obligation. Second, there is a good piece of news. Even though the president put somebody in charge of the Postal Service right now that is against, frankly, not favorable to the Postal Service, but they did get a $10 billion negotiated loan, and I can assure you that Congressman Scott and I and others, we are going to be vigilant on making sure that the Postal Service does its job. One of the reasons, though, why we want to encourage, if you choose to vote by mail, that we encourage you to vote early. And one of the things the Congressman and I are working with the governor on is if you apply for an absentee or vote by mail ballot, it comes with a stamped return envelope so that you can fill it out, sign your name, drop it back in, and exercise your constitutional duty right away. But we really want to encourage people vote early because God knows, as we've seen in some of these primaries, where Americans have been denied their right because there's been delays. And in America in 2020, it shouldn't be a choice of your health care or your constitutional right to vote. We can do both, and Bobby and I will commit to make sure that the Postal Service is there to provide that service.
Thank you. We do have another question from Craig Snyder from Norfolk. He states, Congress has been unable to perform its oversight obligations over the Trump administration. What do you propose to do to require the administration to comply with congressional oversight?
That's been a problem. You ask a question, they don't bother to answer it. We've got several questions. We've got several questions pending with the Department of Education and Department of Labor, the NLRB, that they're not answering, and it causes a problem. We may end up issuing subpoenas. They'll contest them, and they may run out the clock. But I think we're gonna. We just issued a report just last week with skullduggery involving private colleges and a college that had lost its accreditation and lost its ability to get federal financial aid. The Department of Education continued to allow it to get Pell Grants and student loans while it lied to its students about the fact that it was accredited when it was not. We've had all kinds of difficulty getting information about that. We have gotten enough information to find out enough of what happens to know that something fishy is going on, but we're still working on making sure that that's oversight. We've got some conflict of interest questions in the NLRB. We've got other problems that in other departments within the jurisdiction of the committee, and it has been a problem. One of the things that has been considered, and we don't believe we can get it passed in the Senate we have now, but we may be able to get it in the Senate we'll have next year, and that is a court order, a filing in court where the court will consider the subpoena and issue an order within 7 days and a limited appeal or a quick appeal, so that all the judicial proceedings involving it can be over and done with in a reasonable time, so that you can't just ignore the subpoena and just appeal. And by the time the appeal comes, you're several years down the line, and then you comply with that request. And then for the next follow-up, you go through the same thing. It has been a problem. We are doing the best we can with it. But I've been frustrated by the Department of Education, Department of Labor, and the National Labor Relations Board.
And I feel like, I think this is a really important question. And, I'm a proud Democrat, but if there's a Biden administration and they start trying to pull these Trump type tactics, that would be just as bad. I think we need, our country is a rule of law. And in terms of the short term, as Bobby just laid out, they had this attempt to try to run out the clock. And, and this goes back as well to the question about the post office and stuff. We need to send such a resounding vote this November. And I, honest to goodness, believe it. It's not Democrat, Republican, Independent, whatever. It's about whether our nation is going to remain a nation governed by rule of law. And I think the biggest signal we can send is if we send an overwhelming rejection of this kind of abuse of rules, then it will be a huge signal, because it will then mean, because I think we need to hold, I hope Joe Biden's president, but I think Joe Biden needs to abide by the same kind of rules that, Trump should have abided by. But if we don't get that big margin, then as so many questions have been asked, what happens if Mr. Trump tries to ignore the results? That's why, I know it's July 31st, COVID's on our minds, school, other things, but my goodness, and in Virginia, we always say this is the most important year, but I cannot think, I've not been in public service as long as Chairman Scott has been, but this is the most important election I'll ever have been in. And Ryan, as a young man, even when you get to be Bobby Scott's age, you'll still look back and say this was the most important election you ever voted in.
I will remember this, but I do want to pass along to another question that hopefully.
Your walker,
Go ahead, Congressman.
gray hair in your walker.
Yeah, 60 years of service. Yeah. So I do want to pass along to another question that hopefully can clear up some confusion in regards to voting. Moravia from Norfolk asks, what is the deadline, or is there a deadline for determining whether universal mail-in voting will be approved for the presidential election?
I'll just start with that. I do not think, considering the Senate we have, we will get universal mail-in voting. It will be determined state by state. We are lucky in Virginia that we have universal mail-in voting. You can vote without any reason, simply by choice. And you can go to elections.virginia.com right now and get your absentee ballot and have your vote cast right away. September 19th, you can start to vote early. And but I don't think, unfortunately, that Bobby and I think the House could pass universal mail-in voting, but it will not pass the Senate this year.
I do just want to take a moment to correct. It is elections.virginia.gov. But go ahead, Congressman.
All right. That's because, yeah, you're right.
I agree. It's going to be state by state. And in Virginia, there is no deadline. You have your choice in voting without any excuse. You can on election day, or you can vote by absentee ballot. And absentee you can do in person or by mail. We would just advise you, because under present law, the ballot has to be back by election day, that you begin that process early, so that you don't, so that your ballot doesn't get back late.
I'm sorry, Congressman. And so we do have another question.
And Ryan, I apologize. This has to be my last question, because I've got one other thing, but I know Congressman Scott's available for another half hour or so if he needs to be.
No, this will be the last question. Joy from Facebook asks, what are we able to do to help with the military with COVID outbreaks?
I was on a call with a bunch of military families earlier today, and there are a series of things. Military has still not gotten to the point where they are testing all members. They're testing most at risk. They're testing people about to be deployed. They have a four-part program. They have not got to Section 3 or 4. It is why we need to continue to upgrade our number of testing. One of the things that I'd like to work on, and I've not had a chance to talk to Bobby about this, but We now have about a 17% of our military spouses have lost their jobs. And sometimes the military is not very good about planning when you're going to be redeployed. I would love to work with Congressman Scott and the business community, particularly in Hampton Roads, and encourage our employers to look to our military spouses to try to get them, you know, not necessarily preference, but let employers know that there's a lot of military spouses who want to go back to work, that need to go back to work. And if we can help them, I would do all I can. And on the testing front, we're in phase 2 of their four-phase program. And it is, again, begs the question of why we're not better along on testing.
I would exactly so. The fact that we do not have adequate testing is a national embarrassment. Every other country has figured out how to do it, and we're sitting up here waiting for people to show symptoms before they're eligible for a test, and then taking 10 days to get the results. And that's just embarrassing. You're not going to get control of this virus unless you have on-the-spot testing and the results coming back almost immediately, or certainly no more than 24 hours. And until you have that, you just don't have any control over the virus. And really, we ought to be ashamed of ourselves. And this is maybe back in April, February, March, maybe by April, we had an excuse. But all through May, we should have figured this out like every other country has done. And you can't, I don't see how you can open a college without testing students on day 1 and having recurring tests. I don't see how you can open the high schools without doing massive testing. In the military, you can't deploy having people on ships and don't know what's coming on the ship without massive testing. You can't wait until people show symptoms, because by then it's just too late. We put tens of billions of dollars that was not requested. We didn't even request it. We just gave them tens of billions of dollars to get the testing thing straight. And all you hear from them is, well, the more you test, the worse his numbers look like. And it's an embarrassment. The big numbers are embarrassing. Well, you know, it's just hard to, that's why we have elections. You know, we just have to, we might have to wait for elections to get hold of the virus. And then we can do something.
Yes, thank you so much, Congressman Scott. That was our last question. And I'll pass it over to first Congressman Scott for some closing, and then to Senator Warner.
Well, thank you. And I think you can just tell from the questions and the concerns, the urgency of re-electing Mark Warner and a Democratic Senate and Joe Biden. Okay, and the members of Congress that we're all on, the members of the House are all on the ballot. And because it makes such a difference, we saw that difference in the General Assembly, where voting rights, minimum wage, gun safety, couldn't even get out of subcommittee last year, all going through, and we can do the same thing. We've seen the HEROES Act sitting over in the Senate, all of the good things that could be done to help people through this pandemic. We just need more people like Mark Warner. And as I said, he's just made Virginia proud the way he's conducted himself on the Intelligence Committee. So thank you, Mark, for your willingness to serve, and thank you, Ryan, for organizing the call.
Well, Ryan, thank you. Thank you for helping both me and Congressman Scott. And again, you know, Bobby is way too humble in terms of his comments. So many of the things that happened in the General Assembly also happened on a national basis, because Bobby Scott is chairman of one of the most powerful committees in the House of Representatives. And, you know, even though this man has served for countless decades, he has done a remarkable job. Now, listen, we're giving each other a little bit of grief here, but, you know, we are a team, and you know, I'm proud to work with Bobby. He is my friend. You know, I think we can do good things for Virginia and our country. Please just get out and vote, and you know, let's bring this country back to where it should be. Thank you all. God bless you.
Thank you all for joining.